Hello, everybody. Mahaneela, that's me. So it's kind of a long name. My name's actually Mahaneela Chowdhury Reid, but one of my goals for 2018 was that I wanted to just go as like a mononym, like Prince, Madonna, Beyonce. It's basically my inspiration. But I guess I think I should tell you a bit more about me and like how I got here. So I'm a photographer, a director, a music manager, a creative consultant, a DJ, an event producer, and a storyteller. And for today, I'm also a public speaker, which is making me kind of shit my pants a little bit, but it's fine. So let me just make sure this isn't too loud. I dropped out of university in my second year to pursue a career in the creative industries, although I wasn't really sure what that was. I just didn't really want to do what I was doing. And then things kind of developed on from there, started in advertising, and then moved my way up to working for a record label. And over the last 4 years or so, I've worked with some of my favorite artists at XL and Young Turks, from the Mercury Award Prize winner Sampha to Radiohead, the XX and FK Twigs, just to name a few. So my name Mahaneela is actually made up. It means great sapphire or great blue. And as far as I know, I think I'm the only person who's got it. And because of this, yeah, I'm trying to go with the whole like mononym thing. So if you see my name and you see my surname, just scrub it out if you can. Anyway, here's me, age 8 or 9, prepubescent, looking great, almost a monobrow going on there. And yeah, I'm from a lot of different places. So I'm half Indian and half Ghanaian, but I was raised by my mom and my stepdad, who's from Jamaica. But I was also born and raised in the UK. So there's a lot of flags that go in my Instagram bio. And, you know, as well as being from India, my mum was actually born and raised in Uganda, so there's another additional flag in there that doesn't usually get a mention. So I like to think of myself as a person of the world, I suppose. And recently, I've kind of come to the conclusion when talking about and doing interviews, like I just did a feature with It's Nice That recently, talking about where I'm from, and I realized that I'm not really supposed to be here. So here's my immediate family on my Indian side. My grandfather, who's in the top right there, he was a wildlife photographer and painter. And my grandmother, she was an author and an English literature professor. So I think a lot of my creativity comes from them, even though my granddad actually passed away when I was only 12. So like I said, I'm half Indian, but the Indian side of my family were raised in Uganda. And when my mum was just a teenager, she had to escape a war-torn Uganda during a civil war and escape the dictator Idi Amin and came to the UK. On her way, just to make matters worse, she was involved in a really terrible car crash, which meant that, as doctors told her, she wasn't going to be able to have children. On my dad's side, this is my grandparents in Ghana in, I think, the 40s or 50s, pretty long time ago. Basically, they came to England because they were looking for a better life. There wasn't many opportunities back in Ghana for them, and they wanted their kids to have a better education. So, because we don't have a lot of time, we'll just fast forward to when I arrived, which was the summer of 1993. And yeah, my mum defied the doctors that told her she couldn't have kids, and she had me, and then 6 years later, she had my baby brother. So I go back to that realization of me feeling like I'm not supposed to be here. When you think about it, my very existence is the product of years of political unrest, mass migration, colonialism, and civil war. And there were so many decisions that could have been made that would have meant I wouldn't be here with you all today. But I am, so shout out to my mum for that one. I grew up in a little place called Roehampton in southwest London. It was a predominantly white and middle-class area, and I didn't really have any South Asian friends growing up. I didn't really have much contact with the black side of my family either, through my stepdad. And although living in a home with multiple cultures might seem cool or exotic, the dichotomy, or even the trichotomy, if that's a word, of my identity was really confusing for me. And it built this sense of wanting to just do and be one thing within me. I didn't really feel Indian enough. I didn't look Indian. I didn't feel African enough because I didn't have a connection to my Ghanaian side. I didn't feel black enough because I was born and raised in Southwest London and sounded kind of posh to some of my friends. And so whenever somebody asked me where I was from, they'd always get a different answer because I just wasn't sure. And this theme of not knowing what I was and wanting to put myself into one box stayed with me right up until my adulthood and translated itself into my journey of discovery creatively. For example, it took me 6 years of photographing people before I could actually say I was a photographer, which seems crazy because in those 6 years I did some really amazing work when I look back at it with some incredible people. But once I did start calling myself a photographer and believed in myself a little bit more and realized that I didn't have to just be one thing, I realized that I created a box, and then I realized that there isn't a box at all. And in fact, that was something that came from fear of not belonging and feeling like you're not supposed to be here. So there's this idea of being a jack of all trades and being a master of none. So when I quit university, I started working in advertising, and I was a social media manager, and I thought I couldn't be a photographer at the same time because working in social media and advertising, that requires, critical thinking, strategy, and that's a totally different part of the brain to being creative and being an artist. And it just seemed illogical to me that you could be a savvy strategist and also be an artist, or think critically and creatively at the same time. But I realized that I don't believe that anymore. And I think this idea of being a jack of all trades and master of none is something that has actually perpetuated the idea that there's something negative about doing more than one thing, and that in some way you kind of diminish one skill by taking on another. So the term jack of all trades, master of none, originated over 100 years ago. It started out as just jack of all trades, and then somebody added in master of none, which is pretty shady. But then somebody else added something else in, which I thought was pretty cool. They wrote, still better than a master of one, which I think is like the best way to kind of look at it. And yeah, I've decided that I didn't want to keep putting myself into this box, so I decided I was going to smash the box and just go for all the things I wanted to do. So over the last, 6 years or so, this is just like a little snapshot of some of my work. This is a lot of portraiture. As you can tell, my favorite color is obviously yellow. That's Steve Lacey there on the right. These are some other portraits from my In Ochre series. This is, again, some more fashion work and press imagery for artists. This is my first digital cover I did, which was shot in South Africa. I did the makeup, I did the styling, I did the art direction. And as I've kind of developed, I've realized that I've come to wear a lot of hats. And that it's okay, and it actually makes a lot of sense in the kind of world that we're living in now. This is some work I did, portraiture of Sampha, when I was on set of a documentary I made called Everything is Recorded with my friends at Child, which was my first ever documentary film I did, and that came out earlier this year. This is the first album cover I did for Danae Moore, who I now consequentially manage as well, an A&R for. So again, another crossing of disciplines. More portraiture, more yellow. I'm obsessed with yellow. I also did the makeup and stuff on this too. And I think that sense of I used to really think of it as being DIY, me doing these things, but now I'm kind of getting into the idea of oh no, I actually can do this, and that's just another skill. And so finally, after smashing the box and being able to call myself a photographer, as well as all of the other things I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, shot my first ever magazine print cover for Galdem, which is right here. And this happened literally in the morning after my first ever music video in the US, which is my most recent project, which was for a track with the rapper Dram. Literally just happened to be in New York at the same time as the rest of the Galdem girls who were there for Afropunk, and everything just worked. Here's a couple more behind the scenes kind of photos, as well as obviously a mirror selfie, because that's mandatory these days. And yeah, it was an amazing shoot because it was an entirely woman/non-binary POC group, from the makeup artist to the art director, styling, everything, and I got to pick my own team. And it was just an incredible, empowering moment to have my first cover be for a print publication, and for it to be for Galdem, which is so dedicated towards uplifting women and non-binary folk like that. So yeah, as I continue to establish myself more and do more of these like talky things, I've come to realize that the complexities of my heritage are often a talking point for people. It's often something I get asked about. And alongside with that, so are the complexities of all the things that I do. And it's hard to explain how everything can fit into one. People don't seem to grasp that an average day for me might begin with negotiating a fee for Danae, and it might go on until I'm like writing a treatment for her, and then in the afternoon I might be taking pictures of somebody for a magazine and then interviewing them, and then by night I might be DJing or running an event with Cozy. But this kind of fluidity of workflow seems unrealistic to a lot of people. And it's because we're constantly told just to master one thing, to not distract ourselves from the main task at hand, whatever it might be. But I think that I'm testament to the fact that it doesn't have to be that way. And yeah, you might not be from loads of different countries or have a really complicated background or even know where you're from. But there's one thing that remains the same for me and for everybody here, and that is that everyone in this room is a really multifaceted, talented, diverse individual with quirks that make you you and interests that are valid and should be explored. I would never have become a director from a photographer or an event producer or a manager or a DJ or a makeup artist or an art director if I didn't just try. And I think smashing the box is something that we all need to do. And yeah, that's basically what I wanted to say today. Thank you.